This is Dr. Ted Hildebrandt in his New Testament History, Literature, and Theology, lecture number 3, on the Jewish sects like the Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, Zealots, and Samaritans, as well as the Jewish literature, the Mishnah, the Talmud, and the Tosefta.
Welcome this afternoon to our next set of videos on the backgrounds to the New Testament. Last time we kind of drew a historical scenario, playing the historical background of the New Testament. We started out with the Persians, with Cyrus the Great, who was kind of a messianic figure, an anointed one from the Old Testament. We moved on in the Persian Empire to Darius, who was the great organizer of the Persian Empire. And then Darius was the one under whom the Second Temple was built. And the Second Temple then is going to take us down to the time of Jesus. Jesus will come into that Second Temple that was remodeled and expanded tremendously by Herod the Great. So the Persians left way then. The Persians kept going out, conquered Egypt, Turkey, took Mesopotamia. They had a huge empire all the way over to India, the Indus River. And then they started fighting with the Greeks. And the Greeks then, over a period of years, this went on with the Greeks, and then Alexander the Great came up, taking the army of his father, Philip of Macedon, and riding that army through Turkey, defeating the Persians, and then down into Egypt, over to Mesopotamia, and then all the way over to, the Indus River, Afghanistan, Iran, and basically conquering the whole world in about 10 or 12 years. Alexander then died early in his 32, 33 era. His child was too young to take over, so his generals took over, 4 generals, and basically Antigonus got the Mesopotamia area over into Syria, and Ptolemy got the south in Egypt. Ptolemy then got Israel, and Ptolemy from Egypt, the Ptolemies in Egypt, Ptolemy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 20, 30 of these Ptolemies in a row. For about 100 years, from about 300 to 200, the Ptolemies were tolerant, and they ruled Israel. And they actually, the greatest achievement for them was that they translated the Hebrew Old Testament, Hebrew and Aramaic, into Greek, and that was called the Septuagint, the LXX, the Septuagint. And they basically, now we have a Greek Bible that the world could read now, largely as a result of the tolerant Ptolemies. But about 200, about 198, the Syrians, who had been formerly, the guy had been a general of Ptolemy, basically the Syrians moved down and took Israel. And this is when Antiochus Epiphanes and First Maccabees takes place, and there's these tremendous culture wars where the Syrians are trying to force the Jews to comply, and basically they force them to eat pork, they no circumcision, burning scriptures, defiling the temple. And so the Maccabees, the 5 Maccabees boys, rise up and they fight against the Syrians, purify the temple, and then finally there's an agreement made between the Syrians and Israel. And so that tension between Syria and Israel has gone on for thousands of years. Then what happens is basically Simon, one of the 5 Maccabees, Judas was the fighter, we said Jonathan was a diplomat, and Simon then sets up with the high priesthood and sets up what's called the Hasmonean line. The Hasmonean line comes down to John Hyrcanus, where the Pharisees are introduced, and then down to Alexander Jannaeus and Salome Alexander. And then the Hasmoneans actually start fighting among themselves, and that's when Rome steps into the picture and says, we want taxes, man, you guys can't be fighting. And so basically, Rome steps in, Pompey goes into the Holy of Holies, and Herod is placed on the throne as king of the Jews in about 37 BC. Herod, we said, didn't get along with Cleopatra and Antony, especially Cleopatra. Herod ends up killing his wife Mariamne, who was a Hasmonean, who was in the line from Simon from the Maccabees. Herod marries in, but then he kills her, as well as his own sons. And so what we've got now is something new. Herod dies at about 4 BC, so we said Jesus was actually born about 5 BC. We know Herod died, I think there was a lunar eclipse or something that they're able to identify exactly when Herod did not make it to 0. We said that the AD BC system was designed by a guy in about 600, 625, and when he figured out the time back from 625 AD back to the time of Jesus, he missed the birth of Christ by about 4 or 5 years, which isn't bad after going back 600 years without modern tools and things. But now we know through eclipses and other things. Herod died about 5 BC. Jesus was born probably about 5 BC. Now, after Herod dies, we have what are called the tetrarchs. The tetrarchs take over, and these tetrarchs appear in the New Testament. And so you can see the top guy. We have Archelaus. Archelaus got the biggest piece of the pie. He got Judea, which is basically a tribal area of Judah next to the Dead Sea, below Jerusalem. He got Idumea, which is the old Edomite territory down to the south of Israel and over to the east side, southeast of the Dead Sea, where the Edomites used to be. And he also got Samaria. So not only Judea, but Judea and Samaria. So he got the biggest piece of the pie, kind of the double portion, if you will. Later on in his life, about 6 AD, he's exiled to Gaul by the Romans, and so Archelaus disappears fairly early. Herod Antipas is going to be the Herod that's the Herod Antipas up in Galilee that John the Baptist will run into. Herod Antipas gets Galilee and Perea up more toward the north. It's Herod Antipas that kills John the Baptist. John the Baptist said of Herod that he was not supposed to marry his brother Philip's wife, and Herodias' daughter danced before Herod. He said, "I'll give you half of my kingdom. What do you want?" She said, "I want John the Baptist's head on a tray," and lo and behold, John was beheaded by Herod Antipas, and so he's a pretty bad fellow. Herod Philip is the other brother, and he was the former wife of husband of Herodias, and he is the Golan Heights area. And so we basically get these three people. They call them tetrarchs. Never could figure out the tetrarchs. Tetra means 4. How come there's only 3 brothers? Well, it appears, for some people think, that Archelaus got the double portion, so that basically there's 4 areas, and Archelaus got 2 of those areas, Judea and Samaria. And so that's kind of how it breaks out after Herod into these 4 tetrarchs areas, and Israel is divided up that way.